Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven, and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some malicious compliance stories, and our first story of the day is by Elf Forever After. School? Nah, I think Starbucks instead. So to set the stage, I graduated high school in 2013, and my senior year was a challenge. My sister passed away, my health took a nosedive thanks to chronic illnesses that were progressively getting worse. I crashed and totaled a car, not my fault, but not a fun experience nonetheless. I had 2 concussions, you get the idea. The first half of the year, tardies skyrocketed among the student body. The school changed the student parking areas and basically made it so that any students who drove themselves and any students who used the door closest to that parking lot were caught in a huge bottleneck. And any one student goofing off could potentially keep literally hundreds of students from entering the building. It was ridiculous. Additionally, they decreased the between-class passing period from 7 minutes to 5 minutes. Mind you, if you were to walk from one end of the school to the other when the halls were completely empty, it would take you at least 5 minutes. Add 1,200 other people to the mix, and even 7 minutes was a time crunch. So tardies increased a lot. And the administration got it in their heads that the best way to remedy this situation is to implement new punishments for being late to class. Prior to this year, after 5 tardies, you had to attend an after-school detention with a teacher of whatever class you had missed. That's it. If you skipped class, unexcused by a parent or doctor, 5 times, you received an in-school suspension. And if you missed more than 20 days of a class, excused or not, you had to repeat the class. There were some exceptions to that, but they were basically catastrophe exceptions. The new rules were ridiculous. If you were tardy to a class 3 times, you received a suspension. If you skipped a class altogether, unexcused, you received a suspension. All it took was once. If you received 3 suspensions, you had to retake the class. But if an absence was excused, then there were no consequences. Oh, and they got rid of the 20-day absence/repeat rule. So on to the fun. I was just burnt out by the end of that first semester. I was stressed and upset and dealing with horrible panic attacks after my sister's death. My body constantly hurt thanks to undiagnosed pain conditions, and I couldn't stay awake in class to save my life. I was just over dealing with BS. I spent the entire first semester running from class to class because my classes were clear across the school from each other. I lived less than 6 miles from the school, but was leaving over an hour before school started because of all the road construction going on between my house and the school. There was no way out of my subdivision that didn't involve a mile or more of closed lanes, plus there was construction on the road leading to the only entrance to the student parking lot. It was BS. I was a bit too tightly wound at the time. I was a straight-A student in all the AP classes I could fit in my schedule, and I had never, ever been late to class. So being late to a couple classes that first semester was extremely upsetting. But I still hadn't even managed to warrant a detention. End of the semester rolls around and we're all given a letter notifying us and our parents to the attendance change. Except they didn't include the change to the 20 absence/repeat rule. It just wasn't there at all. They were hoping by not including it in the letter, the change would be overlooked. It was not. So, second semester rolls around, and my class schedule was changed because of human error, and I get thrown in a weightlifting class that I would not have signed up for if you paid me to. I was pissed. I was tired and in pain, and you had better believe lifting heavy objects for an hour a day, 4 days a week, was not my idea of a good time. The weekly swimming day didn't suck though, and then more construction showed up on my routes to school, and I was late. Very late, as in arrived to school midway through second period. So I'm in the office, in tears, being written up with a suspension thanks to citywide road construction, and the attendant secretary and counselor who oversaw these matters are showing no mercy or leniency. I'm handed the write-up to sign and a copy of the attendance policy in full. And lo and behold, the change to the 20 absence/repeat is on there, as is the word unexcused, as in all unexcused absences will result in a 1-day suspension. Do you see it? Do you see the loophole? I cackled. I flat out cackled. Pulled out my cell phone, called my mom and said, "Hey, I'll explain later, but I need you to call the school and excuse me from first and second period. Thank you, love you, bye." And before I could even slide my phone back in my pocket, the attendance line rings. To say the secretary and counselor were pissed would be an understatement. But I wasn't done yet. After gleefully shredding the write-up, I asked if this copy of the attendance policy was mine to keep, and proceeded to highlight the word unexcused and the change to the 20-day absence/repeat policy. I then turned to the counselor. "So I want to be sure I understand this correctly. If I show up late 3 times, I get suspended?" "Correct," said very snobbishly. "If I ditch class, I get suspended?" "Correct," said as he crossed his arms like he was trying to be extra intimidating. "But if I get my mom to call or write me a note excusing me from class, there are no repercussions?" "Correct." You could see him trying to work out if he still had the upper hand. "But good luck getting a parent to agree to that." "And it doesn't matter at all how many days I miss? The 20-day absence/repeat rule has been eliminated in full with no replacement?" And that's when he understood the loophole I'd found. I kid you not, watching that man crumple as he came to the conclusion that I found a way around the suspensions was the best fall of man I've ever seen. He uncrossed his arms and seemed to deflate straight into the chair. "Correct." "Wonderful, thank you for your time. I've got some time before third period, so I'm gonna go hit the vending machines. Bye." And off I went. Strolled into third period with pretzels and a Coke, happy as a clam. That night, my mom wrote me out roughly 50 notes that read, "I excuse OP from blank periods. If you have any questions, please give me a call at work number, signed, OP's mom." And she repeated writing out those notes a month or so later. I skipped everything. Gonna be cutting close to make it to first period? Skip it. Hit Starbucks instead. Don't want to go to that freaking weightlifting class? Don't. Take a 90-minute lunch instead. Overslept? Well, get some breakfast on the way to third period, but then skip that awful weightlifting class and come back for fifth and sixth periods. Need more time to study for a test or finish a project? Skip the morning altogether and only come in for that math test. Go home after second period to get ahead on that project. That weightlifting class? After the first few weeks, I attended the swimming days and the game days, soccer or dodgeball, nothing else. Think about that. 1, maybe 2 days a week for the whole semester. If I attended 30 classes total, I'd be surprised. And of course, they called my mom to verify the notes, and she flat out told them she had supplied me with fill-in-the-blank notes, and she would gladly verify them all as legitimate. The sheer amount of times I hit Starbucks at 9 a.m. on a school day was astounding. And it was done on purpose. I was flaunting that I had skipped classes. Every time I walked into that office with a Starbucks cup and a note, I saw a little glimmer of fury in the secretary's eyes. If the counselor was there, he'd lean against the wall and glare, but he couldn't do anything to stop me. Our district had a strict policy change policy, which meant that any changes to things like attendance policies and dress codes had to be implemented at the start of a semester and had to remain in place for the duration of the semester. That counselor tried to appeal to the school board to change the policy at every single meeting that semester. I attended the first one. One of the school board members lost his crap laughing at the situation. He asked, "What idiot wrote this policy?" And that counselor turned Coke can red. They basically told him that he'd made this mess, he could deal with the fallout. They returned to the previous attendance policy the following school year, but as I was a senior, that didn't matter to me. Naturally, I told others of my discovery, and soon enough, everyone was exploiting this loophole. Of course, some parents wouldn't excuse their kids, but enough would. We all showed up on count day though. My grades stayed at their previous level, and my mental and physical health improved as I was no longer running myself into the ground. All I know is that without that loophole, I would have run myself into the ground and probably ended up in the hospital. That loophole saved my life, and after all I did was ask my mother to excuse my absences. It's not my fault I was allowed more than 20. So whenever you were going to school, if this policy was in effect for you, would your parents allow you to get away with something like this, or would they demand you go to school on time? Let me know in the comments down below. I think mine would probably demand that I still go to school on time. Our next story is by Galaxy Cube 101. Want my notes? If you say so. Back in high school, I was a bit of a nerd. My grades were all A's and all my teachers loved me. Well, except for one, but that's a different story. Of course, this meant I got bullied a lot. One of these bullies was well known by students. We'll call her Megan. Megan was your textbook bully. Sarcastic, rude, had the girl group, etc. People would be surprised if you hadn't heard of her on your first day. Well, all the students knew that she always cheated on tests. None of the teachers believed students when we told them, because Megan felt obligated to always be the teacher's pet. Megan would always find a way to bribe students or blackmail them into giving her their notes. Well, test day arrived and I could tell something was up. She walked into class without her usual smug grin. She just looked worried. My desk was to the right of hers, so I got picked on the most. We sat down, and while waiting for the teacher, she leaned over to me and said, "I forgot my notes, could I use yours?" This was a shock to me because she had never asked for my notes before. Cue the malicious compliance. See, I wrote my notes in code so that no one would be able to steal them. I shrugged at her and said, "I don't see why not." I then tore out a page of my notes and handed it to her. She folded the paper up and put it in her backpack. About 10 minutes later, the teacher walked in and the test began. I watched from my seat gleefully as she carefully unfolded the piece of paper. Her face went pale and she said, a little too loudly, "What is this?" This caught the teacher's attention, and the teacher asked Megan what was wrong. Megan gave a quiet, "Nothing," and I tried not to laugh for the rest of the test. For this test, we had to submit both the test paper and the notes. When I submitted my notes, I just used a piece of paper that read, "Sorry, no notes." Megan had to borrow them. The next day in class, Megan's desk was empty, and it remained that way for the rest of the year. Imagine having such a problem with people cheating off your notes or stealing your notes or whatnot, that you literally have to write them in code. It would have been really cool to have like an extra page of notes that was just absolutely nonsense or like all incorrect answers and whatnot. But also just having a page of encrypted notes that no one would be able to make sense of, that works just about as good. And our final story of the day is by Jesus Christ 1. Want to violate labor laws by keeping a ride open for a few more minutes? Okay. I worked as a shift supervisor at a water park. Most of our staff were under 18 and can work no more than 8 hours per day in accordance with our state's laws. The shifts were 8:45 a.m. to 5:15 p.m. with an unpaid 30-minute lunch period. Pretty standard stuff. We had this lazy river that took 8 minutes for guests to ride and 8 employees to staff. Factoring in the time it took to adhere to closing safety protocols, it took roughly 10 to 12 minutes for employees to clock out after being relieved from their work position. Therefore, we closed the entrance gate to this ride 8 minutes prior to our 5 p.m. closing time every single day to ensure nobody got overtime. One summer, some park guests started complaining about the river closing at 4:52 instead of 5. Big Boss comes out and chews us out over it. I try to explain the whole situation and that there needs to be a change to our park's operation and/or scheduling. Not my job if he wants to keep the attraction open until 5. I got the whole, "You're the supervisor, go figure something out" talk. Now, due to logistical reasons, which I continued to explain to him, I didn't have enough adult employees to staff the ride. Despite this, he continued to insist that the water park closes at 5 p.m. sharp, not 4:52. As you wish, my guy. I still made an effort to get staff to hustle at the end of the day, but only for show. We had maybe 5 or 6 minors get a couple minutes of overtime that day, which, if held liable in court, can carry a hefty fine of up to $10,000. This didn't go on for that long after, as we soon began receiving a handful of calls from local high schools threatening to revoke work permits. Don't you just love the situations where you go to a boss or a manager and you say, here are the circumstances, we literally cannot go beyond these circumstances, and that manager or boss's only reply is, go beyond those circumstances anyways, it's your job, make it happen somehow. Well, when crap hits the fan, there was only one person that gave the green light in the end. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today, so if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So, until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.